Okay, and we're live. Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, April 10th, 2020, and I want to welcome everyone back to our Facebook page. My name is Michael Quedal, Digital Marketing Specialist for the New Jersey School Boards Association. And as you can see, we are once again coming at you remotely through the power of Cisco WebEx, trying our best to always flatten the curve and practice social distancing. NGSBA has been hosting live events to address questions from boards, school administrators, and educators throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. If you want to replay, you want to view a previous broadcast or replay a previous video, click the videos tab on the left-hand side of the NGSBA Facebook page. That's where all of our videos are being held. Make sure you also click that like button so you're notified when we do go live in the future. Next week's Facebook Live broadcasts include some of the following. Wednesday, April 15th at 10 a.m., we're going to welcome back John Henry, and he'll give a iSTEAM and sustainability update with guests from the iSTEAM and education community. On Thursday, April 16th at 1 p.m., we have a very special broadcast in partnership with the New Jersey PTA. We're going to be hosting a Facebook Live broadcast with Kathy Lindenbaum, President of the NJPTA, and Rob Acera, President-elect of the NJPTA, for a discussion about what parents should know right now. In this interactive session, Kathy and Rob will be answering some of the most commonly asked questions parents are asking and fielding questions from you, the viewer. And then next Friday, I want to let everyone know, next Friday, April 17th, Alisha DeLorenzo, who is today's program, will be back once again in her new time slot, which is 1 p.m. So mark your calendars, 1 p.m. next Friday. This week's Wellness Series session will address the collective experience of grief, loss, and trauma, and the factors that contribute to resilience. Then together, Alisha will lead practice techniques to support our own healing. We are also encouraging participation from you, the viewer. Alisha and myself will be monitoring the comment section during and after the broadcast. So if you have any questions or comments or want to let us know that you're here, just drop a comment below in the comment section, and I'll forward that along to Alisha. So whether you are a school board member, administrator, teacher, or even a parent, I once again want to let everyone know that we're here to serve you and help you work through this difficult time. So again, as always, I hope everyone's okay. I hope their families are healthy and okay as well. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Alisha DeLorenzo back to the program. How you doing, Alisha?
Good morning, Michael. Thank you so much. So great to see you.
Good to see you too.
So good morning, everyone. It's so great to be back and join you. Some of you may be off today, and if you're joining in on your off day, we appreciate that you're here. So let's just start off with checking in on our emotional temperature. I'm going to get our slides up here. All right. So thinking about our emotional temperature, what are we feeling right now? Let's just put a comment in the notes, a note in the comment section. I apologize, to just check in with where we're at. And so really taking a look, like shining a spotlight and searching for what are those feelings that are coming up. And maybe there's one feeling, but underneath it, there's another feeling. So I want you to just dig a little deeper to find what it is that you're exactly feeling right now in this moment. What brought you or drove you to sign on today with this topic that's not necessarily a topic of choice for many people, to talk about grief or to talk about loss, and in a culture where we really don't spend a lot of time discussing this. Right now, it's really undeniable that we're all experiencing this. So as you put up your feelings and your emotional temperatures, I want to start off like we have always started off, with a breathing practice and connecting us to our breath and connecting us to getting present for right now, what's happening in this very moment.
Hey, Alisha, I'm just going to jump in really quickly.
Yep.
You know, we're kind of working through this together. I currently don't see your PowerPoint, so I just want to make sure that we're having everything's connecting correctly.
Okay. Let's check it out. It says, let me stop sharing and I'll start again.
Try
How's
try
that?
one more time.
Okay, share content.
Appreciate everyone bearing with us. Sometimes technology it worked 5 minutes ago. So,
Yeah. So it's not showing up in the share content, Michael.
yeah, so if you open the PowerPoint and then share content.
It is open here on my.
Okay, let me bear with us for 2 seconds. I'm going to take back the presenter role and we'll
Hey, hold on, Mike. I found it.
try to do it. Oh, okay, here we go. I'm going to pass you back the ball.
You see
We
it?
should be on our way. Try it one more time, Alicia. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, great.
All right.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks for
everyone, for
being
bearing
with
with
us,
us.
folks. Okay, so we're going to start off with our breathing practice. Hey, listen, that's how life happens, right? Things happen, they come up, they throw us off off our game, and then we're able to come back to it. And so that's just an example of how life kind of comes at us. So to get connected to our breathing, let's just get our feet flat on the ground, get into a comfortable position. Allow your spine to lengthen, creating some space between each vertebrae. Imagining like a gentle string drawing from the crown of your head up towards the ceiling or towards the sky. And as you start to invite your breath in, I want you just to start to notice. Notice maybe as you breathe in the coolness of the breath as it enters through your nostrils. And then as you breathe out, maybe you can notice a warmth, a different experience as you exhale. With each breath, I want you to just follow that breath through your body. So follow the breath in through your nose and maybe down through the back of your throat. Just notice how the breath is happening. Resist any urges to try to fix your breath or to change your breath. Just allow your breath to come. And then as you take your next breath in, I want you to breathe into any stuck areas in your body. So maybe you notice that your breath, you can follow it down to your chest and there's a tightness in your chest. I want you to breathe through that tightness. So use your breath to break up any of the tension that you're holding in pockets of your body. You know, these pockets fill up, we don't even realize. There's a lot of emotional pockets that we carry in our hips, in our chest, in our shoulders. And so just find those pockets, explore your inner world, find those pockets, and use your breath to breathe through and break up any of the tension that you experience. And so now we're going to guide your breathing in a 4-6 breath. And the way that this is going to work is you're going to inhale for a count of 4, and I'll guide you. And then at the top of your breath, you'll pause. And then you'll exhale for a count of 6. So let's begin. Take a deep breath, inhaling for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1, and then hold that at the top of your breath. And then exhale for a count of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a hold. And then go ahead, inhale again for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath at the top of your breath. And then exhale for a count of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold. So let's go through just 2 more inhalations and exhalations at this pace. I'm not going to continue to count for you. I'm going to let you go ahead and pace that yourself. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. As we do this, we start to regulate our emotional response system. We start to regulate our parasympathetic nervous system that primes us for being able to come back to homeostasis or experience a sense of calm. So now that we have regulated our breath, go ahead and just allow your breath to move freely as it does in and out. want to just start this conversation this morning around um, the last week. You know, what's been going on. At least for me, if any of you have experienced something similar than I've experienced in the last week, this virus became really real, and really real in a different way. So 3 weeks ago, I thought that I might have had coronavirus, and I remember after finally a week of deciding that I would go to the hospital, I packed a bag, and I thought as I was packing the bag, this might be the last time that I see my kids. I had no idea what was going to happen. And so that felt really real. I was terrified by that. And then last week, I learned of the deaths of people that are in my circle. And that made it become really real in a completely different way. That brought me to my knees. People who I had sat with just, 3 weeks ago and sat next to and shared hugs with were no longer here. And when we think about, or when I thought about this, it wasn't just this individual loss or these few individual losses that were bringing up this emotion, but it was this heavy, heavy sense of this collective loss, a collective loss that we're all experiencing. And so when we think about the things that we're losing, there's loss of our routine, right? There's loss of our connections to our colleagues. For our students, for our children, there's loss of seeing their friends. And this range of losses, there's loss of jobs, right? There's loss of food. So this range of losses goes from seemingly benign, losing contact with our friends, or our kids losing contact with their friends, to losing people in our lives. And this is something that collectively we're all experiencing. So I wanted to go back and look at what people were bringing into this room and the feelings. And these were some of the things that came up. And this is a collaboration of the comments that you shared, but then also on my team meetings or meetings that I've had, starting off asking people what they're experiencing in the moment. These were some of the heavy hitters. This sense of overwhelm, sense of fear, guilt, heaviness. I heard that a lot. This is really heavy. I've said that a lot, actually. There's also some feeling of being energized to do more, to contribute, maybe actually feeling a new sense of connectedness in this new world. And so what this told me, and what I realized about what this said, was that everything that people are feeling really equates to and is comes down to grief. Right? We feel these same things when we're experiencing grief. So what is grief, right? Well, grief is just our natural response to loss. And that can be anything. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be the loss of, like I said earlier, your routine. So when we feel grief, we allow ourselves to feel the feelings that you see on the screen. And when we allow ourselves to mourn, we really are finding some acceptance and truth about what we're all experiencing. And so that's the beginning place. This is where we begin. And we do that by first getting present, like we just did, and connecting to our breath. But when we look at grief, there are some different models for grief, but this one I'm sharing is by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she talks about the 5 stages of grief. And many people confuse these stages as things that you have to go through one after the next, but that's really not the way grief works. Grief is a non-linear experience. 1 minute you can be in acceptance, and then the next minute you can be in anger. So when I think about grief, I think about the weather yesterday. Right? And yesterday it started out a little cold. The weather in New Jersey started out a little cold, and then the clouds got a little gray. And then this incredible storm happened. My outdoor furniture was flying around, and then not too long after that, the sun was shining and there was a warm breeze. Grief is much like that. We go in and out of these different phases and these different stages of grief. And depending on where we're at or what's happening in our life, it can hit us harder, or it can hit us in different ways. So in learning about the losses, the personal losses this week, was a combination of the individual losses, the collective loss that we're all experiencing, and then my own history of loss, the grief I've experienced before that may play a part in how I experience grief moving forward. So, what has been lost in your life? You can just post up some of the things that you're missing, that you're grieving. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a routine, maybe it's your job, maybe it's basic needs. What are some of the things that you're missing? So as you start to post those things up, I'm going to talk about that, the tragedy that we're seeing all around us. This tragedy is shown up. We follow the cases of how many deaths, right? And we tune in to hear the most recent restrictions on the parks and the beaches, and that means people's jobs. And so these things are changing daily. They're happening at a fast pace. And there may be some relief that none of us are immune to this increase in anxiety and stress, but it also keeps us in an extended state of alertness. And we're not really built to be in extended states of alertness. When we think about the world not before 9/11, right? We will never go back to a pre 9/11 world. Travel has never been the same. The airport experience has never been the same. And so when we think about what's happening now, there will be something new on the other side of this. I don't know that we'll ever go back to a pre-COVID-19 world. Like a couple of days ago, I was thinking about how we have been shaking hands up until now. It's been a common practice, but other cultures, they bow their heads. And so I thought, maybe we'll start bowing our heads to greet people. Maybe that will be the new normal. When we think about developmentally how kids are handling this, what may seem like not so relevant loss for our children in the midst of the facts that we have that people are dying, our kids are missing their school dance that'll be at the end of this year, maybe our eighth graders, or an art show. They're missing their friends. And we sometimes have this urgency to denounce people's grief and say, well, how could you be upset about this when there's all these other things happening? But the thing about grief is that it really is individual. It is unique, and your own grief can't be taken away from you. So for an example, pet lovers, right? If they have experienced the loss of a pet, it feels very much like a family member. People who may not be pet lovers may say, well, it was only a dog or it was only a cat. But to the person who lost that pet that is like a family member, that's not the experience. We saw this happen in Sandy, where people who had lost their houses or who had not lost their houses, there was this sense of guilt from neighbors who maybe their house was still standing, but they looked next door and their neighbor's house was washed away. And so there was this comparison of our grief. But I want you to know that we really can't compare our grief or the levels of grief. And when we think about grief, it's so individualized. But there is no right or wrong way to do it. There is no right or wrong way to do it. I often say there's enough abundance to go around for everyone, but in this situation, there's enough loss to go around for everyone. We don't have to denounce people's grief as something that makes sense to us. So as I started to talk about, the tragedy that we're seeing and the new restrictions and this, how often and so fast this is changing and how this keeps us in this state of alertness, there's different types of stress that we experience. So we experience good stress every single day. We experience some good stress. So that good stress may be a workout, a yoga class. It may be hitting a deadline. It may be getting used to Zoom meetings. It may be preparing for a live session like this. So there's this good stress that contributes to us feeling more motivated and more focused, maybe even excited. And that's generally short-lived, right? We go from one moment to the next, experiencing different stressors throughout the day that we're able to cope with. But then there's also distress, right? And so distress has a different experience. It increases our anxiety. It increases our fear, possibly decreases our performance. And this bad stress doesn't have a pleasant feeling. There's not really a pleasantness to experiencing distress. So while this could be short or long term, when we experience this distress over a long period of time, it becomes chronic or toxic. And so, as I said, we're not built for long periods of distress. Our systems, our bodies are not built that way. So when we experience toxic stress, really what we're saying is that our body's ability to to cope with the pace that stressors are coming at us, the stressors are outpacing our ability to cope. And so what that can lead to is toxic stress that can turn into trauma, right? When we think about trauma, we can revert to the ACEs research and the ACEs study that talks about 10 areas or 10 stressors that show up in 3 different categories. So anyone who's experienced physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, or physical or emotional neglect, or any household dysfunction, a mental illness of a parent, an incarcerated relative, substance abuse, a mother treated violently, or divorce. Any of these 10 in this original study, we found that there was a dose relationship. So as you experienced more of these, you had an increase in experience of physical, emotional, cognitive sickness or illness. These impacted the way that you related to each other and the way that you react and respond to the world. And so what we know about dis-ease that leads to disease, 95% of dis-ease that leads to disease in our body is rooted in fear. So what that tells us about dis-ease is that there's only 5% that's rooted in our genetics, right, that make us susceptible to disease. But like trauma, our genetics can be passed on, and depending on the trauma we've experienced, our genetics can be changed, and we can pass that on. And so when we look at the most marginalized groups of people, and this is from more recent research on ACEs and on adverse childhood experiences and trauma, we know that beyond those 10, there are other factors that contribute to a person experiencing trauma: poverty, discrimination, community disruption, violence, lack of opportunity, lack of ability to get housing, to get food, to get resources. And so our most marginalized groups of people will endure and could endure more, the number of ACEs, so multiple ACEs. While 60% of the population will experience at least one ACE, when we look at our Black and brown children, they experience multiple ACEs at increased rates of 24 and 27% higher than their white or Caucasian peers. So when we think about the coronavirus and we think about how this will impact marginalized groups, there's going to be a disparity here more than we see right now. So just let's think about this for a second. The most privileged among us, right? Those of us who have housing and have food security and are still getting a paycheck, even with all of those privileges, experiencing the coronavirus, we are going to slide back a little bit in our own fears, in our own anxieties. And then with certain supports around us, we may be able to get back to that original state. When we think about people who are coming into coronavirus with already experiencing things like homelessness or poverty, there's going to be less of a margin for getting back to a state of um, neutrality. And so, what we know about following trauma and following the epigenetics of trauma is that this won't just have long lasting impacts on people 6 months out, or 7 months out, or a year out. We're looking at impacts for generations. And so, how do we start to mitigate and raise this conversation up to also say, how do we come together in this? How do we support our most marginalized communities? So, thinking about this kind of ebb and flow of moving between, having resources and being resilient because we have supports that surround us and healthy relationships, to really being in fear for basic needs. I saw this on social media and I adapted it a little bit. I don't know who the original owner is, but I thought it was worth showing the different zones that we may be experiencing during the coronavirus. And maybe you've oscillated through some of these, right? So maybe starting out with this fear zone, hoarding food, medicine, um, calling people and sharing the worst news, and then calling the next person and just kind of polling people to see, did you hear this? Did you hear that? And that's really where we exist, in this fear zone. And then if we move into the learning zone, through some of the practices that we've been doing here together, we might be able to identify some of those emotions. We might become aware of how we're feeling and then make more responsible decisions. Maybe before we start sharing mass information that might not be accurate, we can just reflect on it first and say, is this helpful? Or is this harmful to continue to share out? And then there's another zone, the farthest zone out, that talks about finding a purpose and finding a meaning. Thinking about how you can contribute to helping others, which is what we just talked about. Those of us who have privilege, how do we help lift up the most marginalized groups? How do we show empathy for ourselves and others? How do we try to keep coming into being present, even though we might be oscillating through all these different spaces? So I thought that was a really good example of how we can maybe move through different spaces, just like we talked about grief and how that does similarly to the weather. And so, how do we actually make meaning out of all of this? That's that third zone that it alludes to, that third zone. And making meaning is really what happens after. David Kessler adds this as the sixth stage of grief, making meaning. And so, making meaning isn't going to mean that we can say, oh, this was great. The pandemic happened, and then because of that, these things are different. Making meaning is really about connecting to not the event, but life afterwards. How do we make meaning of a death? It's hard to wrap our brains around someone dying at 40 years old and leaving behind 3 children. So we can't maybe not make meaning of why they died, but how do we make meaning afterwards in a world without that person or without those things? And that's not a destination to get to. It's not, an overarching, let's get there. It's a process of developing meaning. And that process develops one moment from the next, from the next, from the next. So I want to share a parable with you. And this is the parable of the long spoons. So in this parable, a man is shown 2 doors, or a person is shown 2 doors, and they're both identical. And after opening the first door, the person notices that this is a large, large room, and in the middle is a huge, round, circular table. And all the people at the table have spoons, and in the middle of the table is a delicious bowl of soup, vegetable soup. It smells delicious. People are hungry. They can't wait to eat it. Their mouth is watering. And so they take these long spoons and they reach in and they can get the soup out of the pot. But because of the length of their arms and the length of the spoons, they can't taste it. They can't eat. And so after recognizing this, the person realizes that all the people in this room, even though there's this delicious food, are gaunt and sickly and unhappy. And maybe even to the point, I saw one iteration of this parable where as people were going to put their spoons in, this fear of lack of abundance, the other people were hitting the spoons so that they couldn't get anything out of the pot, because that might mean less for them. So thinking about how we have been living life, where have we been lacking abundance and not paying attention to the interconnectedness of us all? So the person leaves that room and goes into the next door and opens the door, and it's the same exact scene. And there's a round table with a big pot of vegetable soup, and everybody has these long spoons. But the difference with these folks is that they are happy, they are laughing, they're sharing stories, they are robust and not hungry. And so when the person looks around, the thing that's different is that the folks in this room were taking their spoons and scooping a spoonful of vegetable soup, and they were feeding each other. So when we think about this, love requires one skill, and that's for us to take care of each other. That's for us to nourish and feed each other. And can we do both of those things at this time? Can we experience our own grief, our individual grief, our past griefs, and the collective feeling of grief, and at the same time hold space for others in their grief? Can we do both at the same time? I think the answer is yes. I think we can. And this is where meaning happens. So I want you to join me in a guided meditation. We'll use that word. It is a guided meditation. And so if you would get comfortable in your seat, place your feet flat on the ground. Allow your hands to fall at your sides. Start to invite that breath in like we did at the start. Start to breathe into those spaces of tension again. Notice as the breath moves in and out of your body, the different feelings that you can connect to. As you continue to breathe, I want you to go ahead and place both hands over your heart. I want you to just become present of your heart and what's going on underneath your hands, feeling maybe the beating of your heart, the beating in your chest. I want you to hold your hands over your heart as if you were holding a baby in the palm of your hands, this gentleness around holding your hands and holding your own heart. So as your eyes close or as your gaze turns down, I want you to bring to mind the loss or the pain that you're grieving. I want you to let the images of the pain, the images of the people, the images and the feelings to just come naturally. There's not a need here to try to fade this or to fix it or to move it. The way that we heal is we have to feel it in order to heal it. So hold all of these feelings, hold these images, hold these stories, hold these narratives gently, just like you're holding your heart in your hands. As you continue to breathe, I want you to just let the feelings come, layer by layer by layer, at whatever pace they're coming at you. And I want you to keep breathing. Breathe compassion and breathe empathy into your body. Maybe there's tears that have emerged. Maybe there's anger. Maybe there's love. Let them come, because just like the whether they'll move out and they'll move through if you let them. So continue breathing, allowing all of this compassion to arise. And just notice what this is like for you. Notice what's happening. Would you like to push this feeling away? Or are you allowing it to come in? So, this grief that we are carrying, and you can continue to breathe as I'm talking through this with you. This grief that we are carrying is not only our own grief, but we now know that this is the grief of the world. And we can both hold grief and we can let it go. So as you invite your next breath in, I want you to practice releasing your grief. So on your exhale, I want you to just start to imagine the narratives, the stories, the people, the things that we're losing or have lost to slip out of our hands and out of our grasp because we don't have any control over those things anymore. Not that we probably ever had control over those things, but don't have any control over the situation that we're in, and we can still be okay in that. So as you're letting your grief go and you're letting these losses go, maybe there's other ways that you'll allow yourself to release some of this tension and some of these feelings. Or maybe you might need to hold on to it a little bit longer, and that's okay too. So continue to breathe and release. Remembering that our grief comes like a wave. Maybe it's a gentle splashing at our feet, and other times it may feel like it has taken us over. Remember that just like your breath, just like these thoughts, they come, but then they also go. Inviting your next breath in. I want you just to think of one word that's coming to mind right now of what you might be feeling in this very moment. Take a deep breath in, and then exhale, release. As you begin to bring your attention back to your space, begin to wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. If you're ready, you can open up your eyes. I hope that if you joined in today, there was something for you here that left you different. I'm not going to put a judgment on good or bad, but perhaps there's something that resonated with you, a nugget to take you through the rest of your day and the weeks as they come with the different changes that we'll experience from here. But know that this is impermanent, and there's another side of it. It won't be the same as it was before. It will be different, but this is impermanent. So I wish you the best of days off if you have a day off today. And I'm excited to be joining you next week at 1 p.m. So we have a new time. We'll be going live at 1 p.m. next Friday. And I am going to turn it over to Michael. Thanks so much, everybody. And happy Passover, happy Easter to those that are celebrating.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I want to thank you for joining today. I want to thank you for joining the program. Another inspiring and incredible presentation. SEL is so important, and we're once again thankful for you to be joining us on the program. I want to thank everyone for watching live, joining us on the Friday morning. As Alicia said, she will be back on the program next Friday in her new time slot, 1 p.m., right here on our Facebook page. So make sure you click that like button so you can be notified when we do go live on Friday. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to let everyone know that future Facebook Live broadcasts will be announced on ngsba.org through School Board Notes and through our Facebook page. So again, press that like button. For the latest information, bookmark ngsba.org/COVID-19, and I'll put that in the comment section below so you can bookmark that page. That landing page is updated daily. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Alicia, and I hope everyone stays healthy. Have a
Thanks,
great rest of your
Michael.
day. Bye.
Bye-bye.